Joining us now, Seth Schachner, the managing director at Strat Americas and host of Breaking Down the Biz podcast. Seth, great to have you with us. It's a poorly kept secret that this is my favorite story in the markets right now. You know, the latest update is we got a lot of these big Hollywood names signing this open letter saying it's the worst possible time for this deal to go through. They don't support it. Does that move the needle at all? Does the deal still go through?
It could. You know, this is there's going to be a shareholder vote in 10 days on it. And I personally, expect that the vote will go through. But, it's a really problematic merger from a lot of perspectives. Netflix, dropped out and didn't win. And you've got kind of the Noah's Ark thing, if you will, of two, studios. They're not identical coming together. And, a lot of it was predicated on cost cuts, meaning layoffs. And whatever is said, I probably still of the school that there'll be production cuts in terms of the number of things that are financed and released. And, what it means for everyone in the town, both the business and the creative community, which is what the news is about today. And there's a long list of everyone from Lin-Manuel to Ben Stiller and, Jane Fonda. It means that we're losing a studio and we're probably losing a buyer of creative talent, whether it's scripts or directors or actors. And, legacy studio. It's not just some run-of-the-mill studio. It's Warner Brothers. So, for sure, there's going to be a lot of outcry on it. It's very, very legitimate from the perspective of losing a buyer. I think the concept is called monopsony. It's not monopoly. But I totally understand why it's happening. But I probably think it'll still go through even with that.
So even with that, we've got promises from Paramount, from Ellison saying there won't be layoffs. We're still going to release these 30 plus films per year. Nothing's going to change. How realistic is that concept? I mean, you're combining two monster studios, as you mentioned, giving a lot more pricing power to one big major player. One of the major concerns cited in the open letter is these sort of mid-level films, some of these indie films that just won't have the ability to get made with fewer options out there. Where do we see this show up? Is it in wages in Hollywood? Is it in employment opportunities? What concerns are we going to see rise up to the top if this deal goes through with the shareholder vote? And that, of course, obviously will likely be met with more scrutiny.
Yeah. The biggest thing, Marley, is this enterprise is taking I think it's $79 billion of debt on. And so that's going to supersede most of the strategy. It's going to be a debt reduction play going forward. And so what I see here, if, the merger or the takeover is being predicated on there's a multi-billion-dollar cost savings that are in that business plan. They've been very clear about that. This is very distinct had Netflix wanted. So you're going to have that. It's definitely layoffs. It's definitely cost cuts in terms of probably what's invested and the number of pictures that are financed and released and maybe even picked up for acquisition. And then just looking out at the broader kind of labor perspective, which is, I think, where some of our leaders are coming from, the AG and our senators here in California. You're talking about, I guess you'd call it an inverse multiplier. You're going to be reducing the number of buyers, and it's probably going to ripple throughout the ecosystem. So it's pretty bad stuff in terms of the town and the working environment. And it's very hard at least for me to take that comment that you just made from Ellison at face value. So I see it as a cost-cutting exercise based around the fact that they're going to have to retire all that debt going forward.
So we've got debt concerns, we've got monopsony concerns, we certainly got the monopoly conversation as a part of this too with the regulators. And then in response to this note, we got comments from California's AG saying it's definitely not a done deal. The Justice Department, I think, came out and said they don't know why certain parties are acting like this is a done deal. They're doing their due diligence. The UK has its regulatory due diligence. As far as the regulation, let's just talk about California first. Realistically, does the state of California have the power to block or reshape this deal in any meaningful way?
That's a great question. I mean, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I think it'll be a real test in terms of states. I guess they could appeal it and other states could join. I mean, we're seeing this a little bit with the Live Nation circumstance where there was a federal, judgment or settlement, and there's still a lawsuit that's actually in front of a jury now on the behalf of the state. So for sure, I think it could cause some problems and cause delays. And, I think it's good that the regulators look at this stuff. And I do think it probably is more about the market for talent, if you will. This enterprise is really big, right? There's 2 news networks in it. There's sports rights, and all those things in different ways touch pretty serious regulatory concerns. I would bet the Europeans look at it, with a degree of depth too, because there's probably some market share concerns over in their territories. So, it's a real tough thing, and it could be a problem for sure.
And so I'm glad you brought up that it has assets in addition to film, because we talk a lot about the Hollywood saga component of this, but there are major news assets tied into this as well. And obviously, when you're controlling entertainment assets and news, which is supposed to be impartial in theory or in operation, how is that going to be scrutinized differently from a regulatory standpoint as they're running an entertainment branch while also contributing to something that's supposed to come from an unbiased perspective?
One would hope they would look at it that way. And I think the big concern has been that there's some kind of preferential thing or relationship that supersedes all this stuff at the federal level. I think that's probably the biggest concern there. But I think they need to look at it objectively in terms of consumers, which is where I think a lot of the attention is going to be. I mean, the irony for me is when I look at it from the streaming perspective, to go back into Hollywood, if you will, I don't necessarily know if there's going to be big price effects because there's so many streamers in the market. There's price competition there already. Netflix is already trying to put pressure on and raise prices, as are some of the audio streamers too, Spotify. So I see it more about, the talent and preserving that and the business around that than anything. I'll also mention to you while we're on it, there's sports rights keep going up. The NFL's getting looked at as well. And all these things, if you're putting them all together in one big organization, they're going to play off against each other as well. So it means there's probably going to be less of a pie.
It's like you can see where I'm planning to go next, Seth. I was going to ask you about sports. That's where I was planning to head. Sports has been no secret. Ellison has been very open about how important sports was to Paramount Skydance, and that's a big part of his strategy now with this combined company. I don't think that's going to change any. But you mentioned the rising cost of these deals. There are fewer and fewer of them, so they're going for more and more. And if it's no secret that he wants the deals that are out there, does that then cause a trade-off or a takeaway from the film and scripted content component? And then how much does sports become an anchor part of their strategy, as we've seen how well sports perform for these streaming companies?
I would bet they play off against each other. I mean, the news over the weekend that there's, the NFL's having its licensing practices looked at in terms of, who they license to, and everyone, it's so hard if you're a football fan. I'm a football fan. I still to this day don't know where I can go to get all the games. They're scattered all over the place, and there's tech titans in the midst bidding up those prices for it. So, live events and live sports are still something that everyone's got appetite for. So I don't see the interest in those rights going away. But yeah, if you're combining these things like you would in a Paramount Warner landscape, it probably would, particularly given all that debt. There'll be cuts somewhere, and it might be in motion pictures, it might be in TV, it might be in some of those mid or even independent titles you're speaking about as well. It's hard to see all the relationships right now because they haven't put it together, and the creative market is pretty dispersed, and pictures and titles will get picked up sometimes independently, by different studios. So you kind of hope that the marketplace doesn't go away. And I think that's what, this letter was about today from all the creatives.
Seth, I could talk to you about this for the next hour easily, but I know we're tight on time here. So I have one last question for you. If you had to handicap it right now with everything we just laid out as potential issues for this deal going through, what percentage would you give it that this deal goes through as announced?
60-40, something like that. I still think it will, and I don't think it's going to be held up, but I think it will, and it'll be something in that range.
All right. Well, I look forward to the next time we get to talk about this. Thanks for joining us today to let me talk about my favorite story. Seth Schachner, Managing Director at Strat Americas.